Well, one way to get a handle on what it is that we're doing in Field Ed with the action reflection learning cycle is to think about how you might go about developing a new skill. There's one theory of skill development that outlines 4 stages of competence. We go from the first stage where we are unconsciously unskilled. That is, you don't know what you don't know. Like it's the first day of work, you don't even know what needs to be done, let alone how to do it or even where to begin. Complete novice. Eventually, somebody comes and gives you a job to do, and then suddenly you realise, I actually have no idea how to do this. And that's stage 2. You've now become consciously unskilled. You still don't know what to do, but now you know that. You know that you don't know. Now, at that point, you could just give up and find a new job, but more likely, you're going to ask someone for help or someone's going to give you some basic training, and now you're going to start developing the skills that you need to be able to get the job done. And the thing is that at this stage in the learning cycle, you need to keep that list of instructions very handy. As long as you concentrate on what it is that you're doing, then you should be fine. This is what it means to be consciously skilled. Perhaps think back when you were learning to drive. All those different things that you've got to pay attention to. Keep your hands on the wheel, put your foot down on the accelerator, but not too far, and check your mirrors and indicate at the right time. Check your blind spot. Make sure you don't drive the car into the next lane as you do it. There are all these things that you've got to pay attention to. And when you're learning, you can do it. You've just got to concentrate. You've got to keep your mind on the task, and then everything should be fine. This is being consciously skilled. Now, eventually, all going well, you get to a point where, you realise that, you can drive without thinking. Everything just seems to fall into place, and the whole thing becomes effortless and second nature. And this is now stage 4. Unconscious skill. Now you can say that you've actually mastered whatever it is that you've set out to do, because you can do it. You don't have to think very much about doing it because it's sort of become part of you. So there you go. There are the 4 stages of developing competence in a new skill. Now, something that I find really interesting about this process is that stages 1 and 4 are going to feel quite similar to you. At both stages, you're going about your work or your ministry without needing to think too much about it. You're just doing what comes naturally. The difference is that in stage 1, you're not thinking too much about what you're doing, and you're not doing a whole lot of good at the same time, perhaps even doing the opposite. While in stage 4, you're not thinking too much about what you're doing, but you're achieving a lot in a fairly effortless way. Which raises an important question. How can you tell whether you're in stage 1 or in stage 4? Are you unconsciously unskilled, or are you unconsciously skilled? Now, you could say, well, it's obvious if you're in stage 4 because you will have moved through stages 1, 2, and 3 on the way to get to 4. Perhaps. But I'm not so certain that that's how things go in real life. You see, this theory assumes that skills are always developed in response to instruction. You'll know that you've become unconsciously skilled because you've gone through a process of instruction and practice. Someone at some point has come along and told you what you don't know and told you what you need to know in order to do the skill. But there's a problem here. Because a lot of the skills that we have, we pick up sort of tacitly just as a result of all the experiences of life. Let me give you an example. Suppose there's someone who is really good at being welcoming and generous to strangers. This 4 stages model assumes that at first they didn't realise that they weren't very welcoming. But at some point, they realised that. Perhaps somebody told them, you're not very nice to new people. And so they started learning how they might better connect with people they didn't know. For a time, they had to work really hard at being friendly. They remembered all the sort of tips and tricks of making conversation, until eventually they'd practiced it so hard and so well for such a long time that it became second nature to them. But the process might have been very different to that. So you might think that this person is just naturally gifted as a welcomer. They might just have a gift of hospitality and they've always been good at this, so there's never been this sort of instructive process. But it might also be that this person may think of themselves as actually quite shy and not very good at meeting new people. I had a friend who was like this, and so they volunteered to serve the tea and coffee at church on Sunday mornings. They did that mostly so that they wouldn't have to make conversation with people that they found harder. They could just stand there and they could serve tea and coffee, and they could still be part of morning tea, but they wouldn't have to have the difficult challenge that they faced. What they didn't realise is that by serving tea and coffee, what they ended up doing was saying good morning to pretty much everybody in the congregation because everybody wanted a cup of tea. And, you think about somebody in that sort of situation, perhaps they get rostered on with somebody else who is much more outgoing and as people come for their tea or coffee, this person sort of introduces everybody and makes sure that they know, who the other person is. And then our person who is a bit shy and reserved, without actually thinking about it, they start imitating what their fellow tea and coffee server is doing. And they start introducing other people as well. And you see, gradually over time, this person becomes a skilled welcomer. But they're doing it unconsciously. It's what we mean when we say the skill has been caught and not taught. So we end up with here somebody is at stage 4 of unconscious skill, but without having moved through stages 2 and 3. So back to my question, how can you tell the difference between being unconsciously skilled and unconsciously unskilled? I think this is the way to do it. Often people in stage 1 tend to overrate their own ability, whereas people in stage 4 tend to overrate other people's ability. Yeah? When you are unconsciously unskilled, often people can be tempted to think, I can do that. Or even, I'm really good at this, when they're actually not, because they don't realise they're not, because they're unconsciously unskilled. But those who are unconsciously skilled, well, I find that they are more likely to say that, well, I'm not doing anything special, I'm just doing things that other people could do just as easily. See? These people are overestimating what other people can do. People in stage 1 are overestimating what they can do. In light of all that, what I want to do with this 4 stages of competence model is to make 2 adjustments. Firstly, I want to say that stage 4 is a possible starting point. That's for those who are naturally gifted. And also to recognise that people can move from stage 1 straight to stage 4. That's for those who catch on to things tacitly without formal instruction. That's the first adjustment. Where does this process start? Secondly, I want to add a 5th stage that we'll call reflective ability. Stage 5 is when we move beyond unconscious skill to now become aware of what we're doing. Aware of what we're doing in a way that means that we can examine and refine your practice. And also so that you can now know what it is that you're doing, so that you are aware of the best way that you might be able to help others develop the same skills. The thing is that not everyone who is skilled gets to that stage, which is why often the most skilled people aren't always the best teachers of things. The person who is so good at maths that they just don't understand why somebody else just doesn't get it. They look at a maths problem, they solve it so easily, and when someone asks, well, how did you do that? Well, often they genuinely can't say how they did it. They just do it. They're unconsciously skilled. And I find often that's the case with Christian ministry as well. We particularly notice it, I think, with good preachers or good pastors. Preachers can't always explain how they go about preparing a sermon. Good pastors can't always describe what it is, what they do to care for people. They're unconsciously skilled. Perhaps they have not yet become reflective practitioners, not reflective enough to be able to articulate what's actually going on for them in this practice. And so there is where field education comes in. It's helpful at the beginning and it's helpful at the end. In the middle stages, if you're in stage 2, consciously unskilled, then you're going to progress to being consciously skilled, that is stage 3, through some instruction and practice. If you think about learning Greek, for instance, you're going to need a good teacher, and then you're going to need to go over your vocabulary, your verb paradigms, your noun paradigms, just every day. Keep on practicing. From there, from stage 3, you're going to progress to stage 4 to be unconsciously skilled just through persistence and experience. You've got to keep plugging away at it. Keep plugging away at your Greek often enough and for long enough. Eventually, you will be able to read the New Testament as easily as you read your English translation. So, instruction, practice, persistence. That's sort of stages 2, 3, and 4. But field ed becomes particularly valuable for moving from stage 1 to stage 2 and from stage 4 to stage 5, the ends of the process. Take being unconsciously unskilled. If we apply the action, reflection, learning process, reflect on your ministry experience with a bit of focus, then you'll soon discover what it is that you don't know. Action reflection is very helpful for uncovering false confidence because the process forces us to ask all the difficult questions about the experience, about the practice, the ministry we're actually involved in. On the other hand, and perhaps a bit more positively, action reflection is also going to help to move from being unconsciously skilled to becoming a reflective practitioner, because the process helps us to make explicit what's implicit in our practice. Action reflection helps us to develop a clearer sense of what is actually going on in our ministry, that we might better be able to review and therefore improve our practice, and will also be better able to teach others. So there you have one of the great aims and the great, I think, gifts of action reflection learning. We're going to take our experience, make it the focus of careful reflection. We're going to think about what we're doing, think about why we're doing it, how things ought to be done, and what we might want to do in response. And in the process, we'll pursue that kind of reflective practice that's going to drive lifelong learning. And we'll also be able to develop insights into Christian life and ministry that we might use more effectively in serving others and in serving the Lord for His glory.